To be able to write our next cipher programs, we're going to have to talk about and understand operators. So you should already be familiar with this concept, at least in a non-programming way. Well, you are, it's just how familiar are you with it? You should be very well aware of what the order of operations are, so that's, the PEMDAS, the please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, right? So those are your basic operators that you're probably already familiar with. And we can do all of those in programming. And that's one of the things that sets programming apart from a markup language. So if you're talking about a language like HTML or a styling language like CSS or something like SVG, none of those can do math. They all just display things or create a structure of things, but they can't do any sort of operations in that sense. If I open idle, and I can just quickly use sort of the interactive mode to create a few things, we can do like 3 plus 4, and it will give us 7. And we can create variables too, right? So we can say that 3 equals 3 if we want, and we can say that 4 equals 4 if we want, and that's kind of silly, but we can do this. And we can do 3 plus 4, so now we're using variables that just happen to contain the same thing in them, and we'll get that. Now we can do subtraction as well, right? So 4 minus 3, or 3 minus 4. So there's different things that we can do. We can do multiplication, division. Now multiplication and division look a little different. So it's not 3x4, it's 3 star. We use the star. And division is not the division symbol, it's a slash. We can also do powers. So 3, 2 stars, 4 is power. And of course, I mean, we don't have to use variables. We can just use the actual integers themselves as well. We've actually already used 2 operators in our programs that you didn't realize because I didn't talk about them specifically. So when we created variables and we assigned something to that variable, that is an operator. We are assigning a value to something, and that is considered an operator. Also, when we do comparisons, like if the user input is equal to 3 or is equal to 2 or whatever, that's an operator as well. So we've been using operators already. Now there are 2 operators you might not be familiar with, and that's floor division and modulus. So let's talk about those. So first, let's show what they do. If I do for floor division 3, I get 1. Before I got 1.333, right? And if I do 3 floor division 4, I get 0. Basically what it does is it gives us an integer. It just like cuts off whatever is after the decimal point. So it's not rounding, because if it was rounding, then 3 floor division 4 would give us 1, right? It would round up. So it's not rounding, it's just truncating. It's just cutting off all the decimal values. And then modulus. What does modulus do? This one, it's going to take some explaining to do. It's really not hard to understand once you understand it. Yeah. So that's 1, just like with floor division. And this is 3. And that can be a little confusing. Let's see some more examples. So that 2 equals 0, by 1 should equal 0, by 5 should equal 4. So it might be a little confusing exactly what's going on here, and that's very normal at first until you actually understand what it's doing. So what modulus does is it is related to division, but it's not showing you the results of division, it's showing you whatever's left over. So if you remember in like grade school and stuff, you would do like, you would basically do floor division, right? If they said like, what's 10 divided by 4, you would say like 2, right? Because maybe you hadn't learned decimals yet. And then they would say, what's the remainder? And you would say 2, because 4 goes into 10 twice, you have 8, and then you have a remainder of 2. This modulus is that remainder. So if we do 10 mod 4, we should get 2. That's the remainder. When we're doing something up here, like I did 28 mod 30, 30 goes into 28 0 times, and how much is left over? all 28 because it doesn't fit in there. So modulus gives us the remainder, and it can be a little difficult at first to get your head around, but you'll figure it out as we play with it a little bit here and there. So 3 mod 3 is going to be 0 because 3 goes into 3 perfectly one time. 10 mod 3 will give us 1 because 3 goes into 10 3 times, but there's a remainder of 1 because 3 times 3 is 9, right? So if we do modulus 2, it'll give us 0 because it's an even number, so we know it'll fit in a perfect amount, right? So just playing with this, you can start to get the hang of kind of how it works. It's just finding the remainder. So if you think about division, it's just giving you whatever's left over. So 20 divided by 3, you'll end up with 18 as the result of 3 times 6. And of course, that means that you have 2 left over. If we did 21 mod 3, well, 3 times 7 is 21 exactly, so modulus will be 0. It might not be quite apparent what we can use this for, but there are some decent things here and there that we can use it for. We'll go over modulus more later with an actual concrete example that we'll use it for. Now, even though we've already done a comparison operator, there are others that we haven't really talked about. So you're familiar with these already from schooling, but you might not be as familiar with the is not. I did show in the control flow video the is not comparison operator. I just didn't really specifically say that it was an operator. In addition to the other forms of comparison operators, we also have additional assignment operators that we haven't covered yet. So you can actually perform an operation and reassign it to the same variable in one line of code. So let me show you what I mean. I'm just going to quickly create a variable. We'll call it var int, and we're going to make it equal to 0. So var short for variable, int short for integer. Right now, if I tell it to print var int, then we know it's going to give us 0. I can tell it that var int is equal to var int plus itself, right? I could do that. And then if I print var int again, then I get 1. But what I can also do is instead of actually having to write the whole thing out, I can just say plus equals. And now if I print it again, it just saved me a little typing time. So like, I mean, is there anything significant between these two? No, not really, but you know, this is faster. What you can also do is you can combine that same concept with other things. So I could do like an exponent, so like to the 4th power. Oops, I forgot to actually use the equal sign. So var int star star equals 4. There we go. Now notice it didn't print, right? So interactive mode, if you do a regular operator without any sort of assignment, it prints it directly. But if you do an assignment, it assigns it but doesn't actually print it. And that's just a little thing that interactive mode does. So now if we tell it to print, actually I don't even have to tell it to print var int. I can just tell it var int since we're in interactive mode. And there we go. So now it's 16. So that's a little feature that can help save you a little bit of time. So those are essentially operators, and we use them a fair amount of the time. It kind of depends on what you're trying to do. Some programs are going to use a whole lot of them. Some might only use a few. It depends on exactly what you're doing. But those are the basics. Now, you can use some of these same symbols in other ways. So like, if we're adding numbers together, of course, like 1 plus 1 is 2, right? But what happens if you add like words together or letters together? So we'll cover that soon as well. It's a little different. It's still an operator, but we're using it in a different fashion. So that's it for this explanation. We'll actually apply it in the next video to create a simple Caesar cipher.